Catherine, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Catherine, I got a list of things that you are. I'll let you tell it yourself here in a second, but a business owner, an award-winning CEO, a board member on the executive committee for the Chamber of Commerce here in Columbus and the Greater Arts Council, active member and former president of the National Association of Women Business Owners, host of the Secret Art of Business podcast, most admired CEO from Business First in 2018, 19, 20, and 21.
Mm-hmm.
And then Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year finalist 2012 and 2013. You've done a lot of stuff.
I have.
Why don't you, in your own words, tell us who you are and what you've been up to over the last couple of years?
Sure. I'm Catherine Lang-Cline and started the company Portfolio Creative in 2005. And it was a little bit of a process to get there, we'll say, in that I got a degree in art. So I have a bachelor's of fine arts degree. And essentially was a little worried about what I would do with that after I graduated because, it's not marketing officially. But the one thing that I had that was really awesome is that at the time, and I am dating myself entirely, is that they came up with this new tool called the Macintosh.
Ooh.
I know. And I took some of those classes and I'm just like, this is the future. I might as well learn how to use it. And that is how I got my first job because I at first was just working at what was Kinko's at one time. When I first got out of school, yes. And I share these little tidbits because to give people hope. And one of the jobs that I went into to interview for was with an advertising company, a small one in Illinois. And I think it was Oak Park, Illinois or somewhere around there. And I was one of the few people that they interviewed that knew how to use a Mac. So they said, you're hired. And that is how I got into advertising.
Oh, that's cool.
And just essentially just kind of kept working and doing that, doing marketing, doing advertising, design. I designed gift wrap for a while, did a ton of catalog work. And I ended up in Columbus, Ohio, and I worked for the Limited Brands doing marketing and design and things like that. And then at a certain point, I was like, I'm going to try something different. And that was based on, one, I was a really terrible employee. And two, I had a lot of drive and I was between jobs at the time. I was freelancing and my business partner asked me, what would be great is if Columbus had this company that could find freelance talent because I spent all my time doing that. And I'm like, oh my God, I work for a place like this in Chicago. That would be totally cool if that was here. And she's like, great, because I don't want to do this by myself. Would you be interested in doing it? And I said, sure, why not? And we gave ourselves about 6 months to pay ourselves because that was all the money we had.
That's a short runway.
It kind of was, but I was like, that's what I'm out of money. So if we can't make anything in that amount of time, then I'm going to have to get some work. And 18 years later, we are still placing candidates because Portfolio Creative is a staffing and recruiting company, placing creative talent. And it's been really fun. It's been really fun.
So 2005, you start the business.
Yes.
And were you always doing this placing of creative candidates? Is that always kind of the core tenet? Or did you ever go like, we'll do some, warehouse folks, we'll do some this? Or has the business grown and molded since?
Here's the fun thing about that is I didn't think I would ever want to get into staffing and recruiting. What I like about it is it's marketing and advertising, and that's what I do. Those are the people I like. And we have had advisors talk to us about, have you thought about healthcare? Have you thought about industrial? And while that probably would have really exploded the company as far as company size, I think I would have really hated my job. And one of the beautiful things when you do start a company is that you get to decide what it is. You get to decide the culture. You get to decide your lifestyle. You get to decide who you work with. And sometimes those are tough conversations because you get so swept up sometimes in these companies that are really horrible people, but they pay really well. And the larger you get, the more choosy you get to get. And we really wanted people that understood the importance of marketing people. Having lived the life as a marketing person, I discovered pretty early that they were always the first ones fired whenever there was a layoff or something like that. And And as a freelancer, I would always have to fight for my rate. And it was so challenging. It's like, well, why don't you value this? It's like, well, and they would ask me, well, why can't you design a logo for $50? You love doing this, don't you? So therefore, the fact that you're getting paid too should be bonus. And I'm like, oh, I have value. So we've always been really big advocates of creative people getting what they're paid, that's what they're worth, if you will. And then it's always been really valuable for us to speak for the client too, because having been placed by staffing companies myself, the one thing that would happen on occasion, and it was horrible, is you would be misplaced into a role. The one story that I always tell people is I worked for just a general staffing company. This was back in Illinois. And I said I want to be in marketing. And they said, oh, we got this perfect job for you. It's going to get your foot in the door. It's going to be awesome. Well, it was working the front desk. And I'm like, I have no idea how. And this was like old school phones too. So it had that like all the buttons and things like that. Because I was like, I can't do this. And they're like, but it's your chance to get into advertising. And I'm like, but is it? Is it really? And I never wanted that to have happen to somebody else. And there's been other situations too where I would get into positions, they'd be placed in a role as a freelancer, and it was like either way over my head, and that I didn't know the software, or it was a certain skill set that was not my specialty. So the one thing that we've always done at Portfolio Creative is to make sure that not only is that person a fit for their skills, it's a fit for their culture too. And that's the value we bring to our clients. And they may pay more for it. It's only because we're so super specific with it. And if people have used freelancers and they have them do all this work and they realize they have to do it again because they got the wrong person, I mean, that is money. So if you get the right person, it's done right in a shorter amount of time and there's no issues, so that's kind of the value we bring to the table. So it's not just putting butts in seats. It's not just filling these spots. I take it especially very personally, and I have trained my team to do the same thing.
Yeah, I'd imagine it's almost harder to place marketing than any other role.
Yes.
Because every other role is like, oh, I need an ophthalmologist. Like, okay, I got one.
Yes.
Well, how good are they? Well, they're pretty good. They got a medical degree, Whereas there's no like standard metric to gauge, is someone actually good at marketing? It's such an ethereal thing. Like, what do you mean you're good at it?
It is. And just to show kind of the spectrum of that too, is we would have some people that wanted to come and be the game changer. It's like, I want to come in and redesign, and I want these big projects. And that's kind of like your advertising person. But you can't put that person in a corporate environment because the corporation has its brand already determined. You're in there to do what you're told, and there's not a whole lot of, creative opportunities. There are, but it's not the same as if you put you in a role where like, we need someone who's gonna be the game changer. And we have both. So it's about getting those skill sets right. Maybe you need the rock star in Photoshop, and another place might need somebody who really knows web, and maybe in a super specific web format. We know all those people. So we're not going to say, oh, you have web experience. Oh, but you don't have WordPress. That's okay. Just go in and fake it and you'll figure it out, and that's sometimes a position I was put in. And if anybody's been in that position, you're like, this is going to take probably 3 times the time that it would be if somebody did actually know the software. So that's a little bit of what we deal with. And the other thing too is marketing people, creative people, their personalities are all different too. And you have to get that right fit culture-wise too. There are some that are super quiet, there are some that are really loud, there are some that have a certain style. And so you can't have somebody who is a genius at drawing teddy bears going in and doing like a medical designed brochure or something. So it's a lot of that experience that comes into play too.
I would also say that marketing is one of those areas of business that can get a bad rap because so many people want to do it and so many people are actually like good at it, right?
Yes.
It's like a very popular major in college. Like, what do you want to do? Like, I want to do marketing. It's
right.
Like, yeah. What does that mean?
It's a vast amount of roles too, and we try and find the people that have that really specific skill set for everything and not the jack of all trades. Because I personally don't think there necessarily is one, and be an expert at it. Couldn't you find a person to do a lot of things? Yes. But at some point they kind of tap out. And sometimes that's where we can kind of come in and help too, because you might have a absolute rock star art director, but you suddenly need changes to your website. you can hire a person from us that can do it in a fraction of the time than it's going to take for that person to try and figure out how to do a website properly, design, front end, back end, or whatever. So it's kind of cool that we can get people to plug in certain skill sets temporarily versus having to hire a person full time to just maintain something when that may not be necessary.
So you said here that you are a terrible employee.
Yes.
What made you say that? Because I don't think I would have been a terrible employee because I was never really an employee. So I graduated from college in 2014 and I started this company, Mixed Solutions, in September of 2014. So next year will be 10 years in business for us.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like a referee for soccer, and I worked at Best Buy selling phones, which I was great at. I was a top salesperson 9 months in a row.
Congratulations.
Come see me if you need a phone. But I really never worked a real job.
Mm-hmm.
Like I didn't consider those real jobs. And I kind of knew that being an employee wasn't for me. But it sounds like you had that kind of depth of employment experience that led you to a point you're like, I don't know if this is right.
Yeah, I was able to gauge that I was not a good employee because I was never at a job very long, for one. And I will definitely tell all the people out there that change jobs often, that is not a bad thing. You can actually make that work.
Yeah.
And I was averaging about 2 to 3 years at a place before I would get bored or discouraged or just want more. And in many roles, you have to kind of pay your dues. You have to, jump through hoops or whatever. And I was just never really good at that game. I was not very patient. I still am not. I would always always had like this visionary spirit where I could kind of see the next thing. And they're like, that's not your job. Your job is to do. It's not to think about new things. So kind of talking about to the person that I was trying to fill before. It's like, we don't want big picture people here. We just want corporate thinkers. But with that said, having a lot of the jobs I did have was probably the best education I ever got to running a business, because I got frontline experience on budgeting and spreadsheets and things like that. But I was just not really good at just doing, I guess. I always wanted
taking orders, if you will.
I just always wanted more. It's like, well, I did all these things, when am I going to get promoted? Or raise time would come around and I'm like, well, that's not enough. I think I'm worth more, which I was young and probably very full of myself, but that is just the path that I chose. And I kind of and then I would freelance for a while too. So it's like, okay, well, now I'm on my own. And then I would work someplace for a while and they said, you're fantastic. We're going to hire you. Great. All right. Now I got a regular paycheck. Got bored. All right. Now I'm going to freelance again. So it was always just this constant change that I needed. And I always tell people with this particular job that I have now, it's the longest I've ever had, so I'm 18 years in and I'm still keeping it interesting enough for myself that I still love it.
Yeah. And that also probably has become way more prevalent now, that kind of style of job keeping where it's like 2 years and then maybe I'll freelance.
Yes.
Then 2 more years and then I'll freelance. Like back, my parents, they're like, well, you get a job and you work it for 30 years.
They would have been horrified.
And it's like, well, nobody does. They're always like, well, they're going to have questions about your resume.
Right.
I was like, you had a bunch of jobs. It's great. You have so many different experiences.
It's all how you spin it.
Yeah. It's marketing, right?
And it's marketing. And part of the job that we do too is we do get resumes that have holes in them that, that people change all the time. And we just talk people through it and this is how you're going to explain it in the interview, because this is how we're going to explain it when we present it to you. There are situations where people might have a gap and we just kind of talk through this. Did you do anything at all, for example, any design work at all in this 2-year period, in this period that maybe you were taking care of your children or your parents or things like that? And they might say, you know what, I did do some things. Great. You were a freelancer during those 3 years. And here is how we're going to talk through that. So especially with creatives too, there's no shutting off of the creativity machine. So you're always doing something, but there are ways to talk through job changes, and it's not that big of a deal anymore. And, when people start either freaking out about it because they have it or start judging people when they're across the desk, I think that's really more the problem than anything else.
So maybe give us some kind of the lay of the land right now in terms of job seekers and job seeking. What are you seeing right now from kind of the labor market in the whole? Obviously, you being kind of a specific sect of that, but what is your general idea of how it is at this moment in time? Because I think for us, 2020, 2021, it was super hard to get qualified candidates. Mm-hmm. I get the feeling it's starting to loosen up, but you're on the front lines of it every day.
There are great people out there, and you can find them in a variety of ways. There are people that post them on job boards, which I'm saying you're wasting your time. There are some people that look for people on LinkedIn, and that's a little bit better. But my favorite way of finding people, and here's your little tip, is already know the people before the job is open. And for us, we're always, always, always recruiting, if not for ourselves, but for our clients. So we might see an amazing person at a restaurant that we think has great customer service. And you might say to them, I bet you're really happy here. But when you're not, call me because I think we would have a job for you. And we would keep people's business cards, we would keep resumes, and we just keep in touch with these people that we've already pre-selected. There's many times in networking situations, you'll meet somebody and you're like, oh my God, that person's fantastic. And I'm just gonna tuck that one away because when I have a job opening, I'm gonna call them. And you can approach it a couple of ways by saying, hi, it's me. Remember when we talked? How's it going? Or in some cases, we will say to people, I know you're happy, but I want somebody exactly of your qualifications. Who do you know that you could send my way? If they're not happy, it's them. And if not, they're going to send you somebody who's fantastic because they don't want to send somebody terrible. It's just kind of the nature of humans. So we are always, always, always recruiting. And we have a massive database of people. Many are working, many are not working, but we use them as the people we call and say, who do you know? Who do you know? Who do you know? And sometimes they're working, sometimes they're not. But I remember when I was working, if somebody would call me and just say, you know what? I have a job for you. I think you're going to love it. And it pays $20,000 more than you're making right now. You know what? Let's have a conversation.
Yep. Yeah, so that's kind of the strategy, but at least on a micro level, are you getting the impression that companies are speeding up hiring, slowing down hiring right now, or just
right
kind of
now
flat?
It's kind of slow, and I am trying to figure out what it is. Usually when it's like this, there's an election, there's something happening like in society. So we're kind of getting that vibe now. It might be kind of what's going on in the Middle East. It might be something that, Russia, China, we don't know. I mean, for sure when the elections start up again, presidential only, it's never the regular ones. It's going to be slow because people just kind of put everything on pause because they want to see what's going to happen. Yeah. And it's like nothing's going to happen. Yeah. Business is still going to work. Let's just keep moving forward. But everything kind of pauses, and that's candidates looking, that's companies looking. It just gets really quiet. So right now it's kind of quiet, but the roles that people are still always really hot for are things that are analytical, that are a lot of handling of the data and things like that. We have spent so much time, putting information out there and collecting the data, and nobody knows how to read it. So hiring the people that know how to read it and know what to do with it has been a little bit of a surge for us.
Yeah, so maybe give me two things. First, what is your advice to current job seekers out in the market right now? What are the things that you're seeing kind of work? And then going back earlier in that, like if you're a college student, maybe you want to pursue marketing or some sort of creative job, what would be the advice you would give to them? Maybe in terms of direction, right? That right. You're seeing be beneficial. Knowing like, right, it could be if you're graduating in 3 years, you might be like late by then, to the party. But maybe just give me those two things, kind of current job seekers and future job seekers.
The piece of advice I like to give to current job seekers, and this is something that always kind of worked for me, and I think it still kind of works, is that figure out who you want to work for. Everybody's going to be looking eventually to fill a role in their company because people move around like crazy, marketing people especially. And let's say, for example, you wanted to work for Big Lots or something, or Best Buy or whatever. Start talking to them now. Say, hey, I'm a designer and I've always loved your company, and I would love to talk to somebody about what it would be like to work there, or if you could tell me what it's like to work there. I'm just kind of checking things out.
And how would you engage with that person? LinkedIn? Would you email?
Yep. I would just go through LinkedIn. Before it was really hard. I would have to actually look up people and write them letters.
Well, that probably worked well. I mean,
it worked really well. And maybe that, you could still do that too. So, send them cards. I'm a really big card person. And the thing about cards is they're short and people don't get them. Get a nice stamp, handwritten. People will open it.
I think I've gotten cards from your company.
So there we go. And hopefully you open them because like, hey, this is not a bill.
Definitely.
And it's not an email, and it's so you can't just quickly delete it. So really kind of specialize in getting their attention, making it a little personal. People loved knowing that they think your company's awesome. So if you got a note from somebody who says, "Oh my God, I love your company. I would love to talk to you about it." Hey, okay, let's talk about it. And then if you like the person and the job is open, he's like, I'm gonna keep you in mind. I mean, that's how people look in the future. For me, I always plotted my path of where I wanted to work next. So if you eventually want to get to work for a company, you might have to take some steps to get to it. But that's a great way to get to that dream job that you've always wanted. What you can do kind of today, I would say, just make sure that you have, your resume is pretty tight. Your portfolio is you can have it on a website or a PDF. Make sure it works. Make sure the link works, because there are many situations where we will get things from people and nothing works or it's not updated. Always be ready. A lot of people will say, I will get this ready when I'm looking for a job.
Ooh,
Always
yeah.
keep putting stuff in, because some of your great stuff could be on the computer that you just left the job for, so always get that stuff. This was a winner. I'm going to keep this. And then when you get the opportunity, really be prepared to talk through the story of the project. We have had many people come in and all they do is flip through pages, and you're like, okay, well, can you give me can you tell me a little about this? So if you have a really good, compelling story, that will also push you to the front of the interview list as well, or to the next interview level, I guess, because they really want to know, what role did you play in this? How happy was the client when it was done? Because sometimes it might look, okay. But it's like, this is what the client wanted. Or I used to have a piece that I thought looked really crappy, and the return rate, because I used to do direct mail, the return rate was outrageous. And I'm like, it's in here because it got great results. It's not my favorite. But you can talk, and there's a great story to that, and you can kind of talk through that. And people want to know your thought process, that you weren't just necessarily just a doer, unless you're applying for a doer job, because we all need those too. And I did that for a number of years too. But even tell that story. It's like, I had to make like 100 versions of this ad, and I was able to do it in a week. Or, people, if that's the job, you're hired, So have a little bit of a story to it, and have a little bit of strategy of where you want to go. That's what I would tell people looking for jobs today. And the best jobs are never posted. It is people that they already know who they're going to hire in some cases. And I know there's been people will post a job, but they know that's going to be an internal, but we have to post it because we have to be fair.
Like the NFL.
But we already know who we're going to pick, and that happens. But if you even get there before that, being front of mind is really huge. Once they get to the job boards, they're grasping at straws, in my opinion. It's like, just put it out there and we'll see what we get, because then they're going to get 500 resumes and yours is going to get lost. So just always be ahead of that game. Be aware of that. Know who you want to work for and start plotting for that. For people that are in college, the best piece of advice I can give is get work in your portfolio that somebody has paid you for. I don't care if it's a church bulletin. I don't care if it's a newsletter for the Humane Society or some doggy daycare that If somebody has paid you for it, even $50, put it in there, because people never want to be the first person to hire you, be the first person to pay you, because up until that point, you're a student. Once you start getting real work in your portfolio, it's a big game changer. And again, just tell the story, of like, this was the mission, here's mission accomplished. And here's, what the deal was, and show a little bit of a process too. Look at me getting better. Look at me getting bigger jobs. But even if you're working, doing layouts at the newspaper, if you're doing, simple, bottom of the barrel sort of work, that entry level stuff, it all counts. And just talk a good game through it. A lot of the jobs I got, like I said, I got a job because I knew how to use a Mac. You got to talk a good game when you're in there. It's marketing. They love it.
Yeah. I love that. It's like telling a story that also conveys your personality and your ability at the same time.
Yes. Because the biggest thing that people want is a connection too. So when you're interviewing, if they like you, you have a way better chance of getting the job. And there's sometimes we will know already. We'll send we like to narrow down to 3 people that we send for interviews for a role, not 500. It's no, these are the best 3. And we can almost pick which one they're going to like, because it's this person, it's exactly like that person, and they're going to hit it off so well, and it's typically right. We can sometimes even the odds a little bit by, talking to people ahead of time. Talk more about, if you're not going to be the ideal person, like we're going to be best friends sort of thing, show them that you are the best choice for that company, because here's what I'm going to do for you. A lot of people come in to to an interview and think, I've got to sell myself. I got to see what they're going to give to me. What's the salary? What's the benefits? What are you doing for me? If you turn the tables a little bit and just say, you know what, here's what I'm going to do for you. You hire me, and this is what's going to happen. I mean, people love it if you're solving their problems versus, okay, well, you're going to cost me $50,000. I hope you do great, but it's here's the money where my mouth is, and here's how I'm going to be different for you. That's a little bit how you can kind of leverage yourself to be the better candidate.
You said something really interesting there that kind of made me think about the interview process, and it's sort of just that instant charisma that some certain people have. How much of a role does that play in getting the job? Because I would have to think, if I'm sort of an introverted designer and then I'm going up against some loud, gregarious person that's charismatic, it's geez, I'm behind the 8 ball on this.
Sometimes when you feel like you're a little out of your league like that, I like to coach people to kind of channel it so they're not talking about themselves, but they're talking about the person that is them, if that makes any sense. So it's a little bit of an out-of-body experience, a little bit of talking third person about yourself, because a lot of people really underestimate what they've done, and they feel like I'm bragging if I'm talking about it. I feel like, they're not going to like me or my work because of this. You have to kind of put all that aside and be like, hey, here's what I did. And you just speak in very factual things. I work for this company for X amount of time. Here are the results. Facts, 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 facts.
I love it.
And that gives you at least the words to get started, because a lot of people who are introverted are only so because they're a little bit more, they're more for the conversation than actually what they're going to say. So once a conversation starts, but you can open it up with all the facts in the world, and you don't have to feel like you're bragging. These are all facts. For me, I had to kind of get in this place where I would have to say, yes, hi, I'm a CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, and I have won many awards and things. I mean, at first I was like, oh, that just seems a little much, but these are all facts. I might as well embrace it. And it's the same thing with candidates too. You graduated with a great degree, and you have done great things, and you're going to talk about how great that is. Then they're going to ask you questions, and you're going to answer those questions. We're all going to keep it above level. And at some point, there are other cues that I can give people that will kind of help them too. Some of the things I like to tell people is, if you're in an office and you see something that's kind of interesting, start having a conversation about that to kind of break the ice. You might, maybe you're meeting with you're like, oh my God, I'm going to meet with the CEO. I don't know what I'm going to do. Oh, but I do see that he has a picture of a sailing boat on his desk. What do I know about sailing? Really quick. Or, hey, nice boat. And then the guy starts talking about his boat, or the woman starts talking about her boat. And now you've totally broken the ice, and you've made it really personal, and you've connected on a personal level. So there's a lot of things, you can see somebody has a family photo on their desk, or they have, something else in the lobby that was kind of cool. All the awards that I saw when I walked in for you guys, and like, hey, look how many awards you won. Now we're making sort of a connection, and people that are interviewing, get that personal part back into it. They kind of come in like it's an interrogation. They're going to catch me doing something wrong, or I'm going to say the wrong thing. You got to kind of get rid of all of that and just think this is a conversation, and I'm going to make it so they like me on some level. And these are some of the tools I can do to do that. And, just then talk about what I think I can do here. Because trust me, having switched jobs so many times, there were many interviews that I went on, and I looked, and when I walked in, I'm like, I don't know if I can even do anything for these people. I don't want to work here. And you can back yourself out of the interview, but you don't feel like it's an interrogation. Like I said, it's a conversation. And if it's a fit, great. And if it's not, it's not.
Yeah, a couple things there. So many people that we have hired at this company, they just come in and they're just supremely confident about what they're going to do. Just like you said, I am going to come in and do X.
Yes.
And as the interviewer, you have no idea if that's true or
That's
not.
correct.
But it sounds great when they say that they're going
Right.
to, I'm going to come in, I'm going to be the hardest worker in here, I'm going to move faster than everybody else. You know, at least if they say that and they're enthusiastic about it, you're like, well, they at least want to be these things, or they believe they can be these things,
Right.
or they have the, you know, what's to even say that they're going to be these things,
Right.
It's just so much about confidence. And I have specifically noticed with younger people, like, you know, late high school and, you know, just out of college, that they seem very timid to start like they want to say a couple of things and then they just want to let you. And I'm like, this is an interview. I want you to talk.
Right.
And before I know it, I've said, you know, 35 minutes of talking and they've said like 5 or 10.
Right.
And I'm like trying to pitch them on my company now all of a sudden. And I'm like,
Yes.
I just need to, and you need to hit the ball back with me. We're playing tennis. It's more fun when you hit it back.
And that's a great point that you brought up because, and we run into this problem too. I swear everybody that does hiring does this, especially for your own company, is that you get so excited about your own company, you start selling it. And it's like, well, wait a second. They should be doing this for me. Why do they want to work here? You know, why am I trying to convince them to work here? Or to your point about the whole enthusiasm thing, it's like, oh, well, I want this person on my team because look at how excited they are. And that can be very enchanting when you are running the company or you're the hiring person. Like, oh my God, they're as excited about my company as I am. I have to hire them. So there is some conversation. There's a conversation you can have with them to kind of have them walk that back a little bit just by asking more specifically, well, what do you mean by that? Explain what that means, being a hard worker. What have you done in the past that really prove that you were a hard worker? Because anybody can say it, but if they have some stories that they can tell, again, storytelling, that can talk about things that they've done to accomplish that, then that's, you know, they might say, you know what, I put myself through college, or I, you know, worked from the age of 11 and I was always driven. Okay, well, now you're telling me that you're a hard worker, but anybody can kind of come in because they're selling too. And the hardest thing to hire is salespeople because, you know, they're selling. But for people that are doing the interview, really make sure you're not caught in that web of they're so excited, so I have to hire them, because they do have to prove it eventually. And the other tip that I would give to people that are doing interviewing on the client side is just let them talk and make it uncomfortable where you don't say anything. And they have to talk. And it's like, and you could say things like, okay, well, go on. Well, tell me more about that. And the beauty of that is they will either emerge as a rock star, or they will sometimes talk themselves into a corner, and you kind of know what you're dealing with at that point. So that's one of the things that I like to tell our clients too, is let them talk, and the truth will eventually come out. And sometimes they'll go on these, you'll be amazed at some of the crazy things people will say, and you're like, oh wow, we do not want this person here because they just said something that was a little offensive, or that was, you know, a little strange. So yeah, be comfortable in that awkward silences sometimes, and especially, you know, with people that are quiet, because I also too would like to have some ramp up time. I feel with a lot of people that are introverted too is that it's almost like you're running a double Dutch game, and they're not really sure when to jump in. So if you give them a lot of space, you'll get more out of them too.
Yeah, the FBI. Former lead FBI negotiator, his name's Chris Voss. One of the techniques he always talks about in negotiating is mirroring.
Yes.
Where you'll just say the last couple of words. So you finish a sentence like, yeah, you know, and we just, we knocked it out of the park for the client. You go, knocked it out of the park for the client. They're like, oh, I need to explain what that means. And you didn't even really say anything, or you didn't even really ask a question.
Yes.
There. But yeah, it is super uncomfortable sometimes to just sit in that silence and kind of force the candidate to either say something or they can't say something, and like maybe they aren't the client for or the candidate for us. Right. Yeah, and you know, the other thing that I was just thinking of, and you were talking about, you want to be kind of likable, you want to be, because like for us in our company, we have such a close knit like group here. We're literally physically all close together. We all come into the office. That when we were hiring, we just wanted somebody we were gonna like enjoy being around.
Exactly.
And when we were in those interviews, we were yes, I'm gauging, can you do the job? Do you have the skills? But also like, okay, if I have to spend 40 hours with you this week, like, am I going to like that? Like, could we go golfing together? Like, would we invite you to go play pickleball with us?
Right.
Or if it's like after work, like, gosh, we got to get away from Catherine. She's just so tough
Such
to
a
be around.
drag.
Exactly. So, there's this podcaster that I really like, and and this is interesting advice for you also in your podcast, which we'll get to. He said when he initially started doing the podcast, what he wanted to be was like a dictionary for everything in this person's mind. I want to go through all the facts, an encyclopedia for all the pieces of information in their mind. I'm trying to extract them all for my listener. And he's like, somewhere along the line, I just found out like that's not my job. My job is to be a vibe architect. I just want to create a vibe where like it's enjoyable and like you don't feel like this is so serious, and you feel like, yeah, I can jump in and like, yeah, let's get a beer. Let's do it, you know?
Yep.
And it's kind of almost a similar thing, I think, for an interview. If you're the candidate, you want to create a vibe that's like, oh, like obviously you want to be serious and thoughtful, but you want to create a vibe where afterwards they're not like, well, that was kind of hard to interview that client. Like they didn't say anything. They weren't enjoyable. Like they didn't do any of the preemptive things like, oh, what's that boat? You're a sailor? Like, oh, I've always wanted to learn how to sail. Like maybe you teach me someday, man. Just kind of create that enjoyable vibe. And I would say, you tell me this, a significant portion of the interviewing process is just like, do I like this person? Especially
it absolutely is.
Especially if you're interviewing like me, where I'm going to actually interact with this person a lot on a day-to-day basis.
It absolutely is. And I would advise people that are doing interviewing to think about what is the most important thing that they want from this. And it could be you need a super specific skill set, and that person might be just as dry as toast, but they're going to knock it out of the park. Oh, we're just going to keep saying knock it out of the park.
Knock it out of the park.
Knock it out of the park, you say. So yeah, if that's what you need, you just have to kind of get over yourself and just say, you know what? We know this about Bob. Bob's, very boring, but man, he knows this thing. But with that said, I also like to tell clients too, is the skill set the most important thing or the culture fit? Because you can't teach culture, but you can teach skills. So if the skills are not too challenging, it's worth investing in that person that you like, you can mentor, that fits, that you can grow, and we'll just teach this person they have the brain power to learn this. They might have a software that's similar, and now we're going to teach them that. We know they can get it. That's your person. But there are just certain skills that are kind of rare, might be temporary. If you're having a freelancer come in or something like that, it's like, we'll just deal with it. There's always somebody that is, not everybody's being a super great fit, but you just have to figure out what's most important for you. So that's one thing I would also add for anybody that's interviewing candidates.
Culture, I think, is so important. I really highly value it here at this company, and it's only just something I think that we've started to really like try to lock in and get together. You saw, our core values on the wall. And I've heard it said, because I've talked to other business owners, they're like, oh, well, we don't have like a company culture. I'm like, no, you do. You just didn't build it.
Right.
It just emerged.
And it does emerge.
And a lot of times from some of my friends in other industries, like people who work in schools or people who work in hospitals, you just hear about the like worst behavior, the worst culture. These people, they just complain about everything. Everyone like hates our supervisor. They're the worst. Like we want to get them fired. And I'm like, whoa.
And that is your culture.
Yeah. and it's not because, well, it's partially because of the parts and pieces that you have, but you have those parts and pieces because you didn't cement your culture before that and go, in my interview, that person seems like they might be a little bit difficult. And that's not what we want here. We want people who are going to be positive influences. And just like you said, what is the most important thing? Is the most important thing that I need a surgeon who can do the job? Or is it like, hey, we can mold this. It's a surgeon's assistant. We can mold that person to what the surgeon wants and likes, and they're really upbeat and happy. I'm not going to bring like a bad influence into that.
Yeah.
So, when it comes to that cultural piece, do you have any advice for people seeking jobs? Because this is something I've heard from job seekers that they're like, I didn't even think about that culture piece until like I got there, and I'm like, ooh, this is not quite what I thought or wanted.
Think about the culture piece. That's what I'm going to tell you, because there have been jobs that I have gotten that once I got in, I knew I could do the job. I knew I could not, just do a fantastic job with it. And the culture was terrible. It was, really, really horrible. Pay was great, but man, you had to put up with some stuff. And you have to decide I guess if it's worth it. If it's worth the pay, you put up with the culture, but culture's not going to change. And if you find that it's a bad fit, just you got to walk out. But there are some things you do to kind of look into now, especially now more than ever, because you can Google things about reviews of companies and stuff like that, Glassdoor or what have you, and see what people say. But it's worth asking those questions up front. Like I said, you are joining a company. You ask as many questions as you possibly can about culture, about salary, about the commitment. Ask them what their values are. Don't just go in and just say, please hire me.
Mm-hmm.
Here's my work. Here's my resume. It's like, no, come in with a list of questions. And they may interrogate you for the first 30 minutes. And then at the end, they might say, well, do you have any questions? As a matter of fact, I do. And nothing warms my heart more than when people actually have questions, because that means they are really interested in the job. I would really caution people that want to hire somebody that has no questions. We're not that thorough. And they should be engaged in the conversation, like we said, and have some questions. And if people are stumped for questions, ask about what's the culture like here? What made you decide to start the business? What is the why of this company? Why does this company exist? What problems are you trying to solve? Really big, deep questions. You don't have to just ask, so what are the benefits here? Or when can I start? Or if you, like I said, the more complex you are, the more you're going to come off as being intelligent, engaged, and really interested in this job. So it's definitely to your benefit to ask the questions, and you may find some things out that that don't appeal to you. You're like, okay, this is not my job. I hate, I'm a perfect fit, but I'm not going to take it. And that's a tough conversation to have with yourself.
Yeah, as an interviewer, if, like you said, they don't have any questions, I'm like, did you even prepare for this?
Right.
Which is okay
Not
if you
one?
it's okay
Not
if
one
you
question.
didn't prepare, but just act like you prepared. At least feign like you prepared, And then on the opposite side, I love that question. What is your culture like? What are your core values?
Mm-hmm.
And then I think you're going to start to listen and go, is this an important part of your business or not?
Right.
Because you may ask somebody, and again, I'm picking on hospitals and teachers and schools just because those are my personal experiences here, from friends that they haven't had great times working for those places. Sure, a lot of them are great, but if you go, what are the core values here at this school? And they go,
I'm not sure.
Well, I don't know.
Have them around here, yeah.
Okay, well, what's the vision of this school? What are you trying to impose upon these kids? Well, we just want to get them through. It's like, okay, that's fine if that's your thing.
If that's your culture.
But is that what you want?
Right. Do I want to be a part of that?
And usually most people who are interviewing, they only find out that the culture is like average or not what they want.
Yeah.
When they're hired and they're already in and they're like, not quite what I was looking for.
Exactly. And there was a time too, and I don't know, I'm hoping it's still not the case, where you would ask people about their culture and they say, well, we have beanbag chairs and pizza on Friday.
Ping pong table. Gotta have a ping pong table.
Gotta have a ping pong table. Yep. But you're never allowed to use it because then you're not working.
And it's loud. It's like,
it's like, do you have nothing else to do but play ping pong? It's like, well, it's right here. Yeah, that's not culture. You have not built any culture. And snacks in the kitchen are not culture.
Yeah. I'm actually kind of playing with this idea and maybe bounce it off of you. We have a client who I like. He's a good guy, but he's been kind of difficult over the last year. And I was walking out of the gym, walking into the office, and I just said to someone, I just want to do happy, healthy business with people who want to do it with us. And I was like, oh, that's pretty good. Happy, healthy business.
Mm-hmm. I like that too.
And I think a lot of people, to your point, you work for maybe companies that the culture is not quite aligned with their values. Well, why? Because they want to make a lot of money. Well, why do they want to make a lot of money? Because the money can buy me, safety, security, happiness.
Mm-hmm.
I want a new watch. They'd buy me a new watch. Well, why do you want those things? Because they make me happy. And it's like, okay, well, wait, can we just skip a step and go directly to like working with clients or working with businesses or working in a situation where, hey, this actually makes me happy. I enjoy doing this. It's still work. I still have to do the work.
Right.
I'm not on a beach, tanning, but I enjoy doing this work because I'm working with people that I like.
Yes.
I feel like I have some amount of fulfillment, some amount of, point to success that I can accomplish things. And you can maybe say, you know what, that's worth $5,000, $10,000, $20,000. Because if you're doing something that makes you unhappy, it's just a time bomb until you're like, okay, I'm done with this. Now I have the money and I'm happy because I have the money. It's
I
like,
know, but
life's short.
the
So
money's not always guaranteed, though.
true.
Let me tell you, because we have had clients go bankrupt. They're like, "Oh, look at us, we're living the fat life, billing, billing, billing," and then the money just stops. And you're like, "Okay, well now it's not so fun anymore," So, and then there's also too that I had this more when I worked for corporations and stuff, but you know, corporations are clients, and you feel at a certain point you've just sold your soul a little bit. And like I said, one of the jobs that I did have that paid me the most money, I mean, it was ridiculous. And I was miserable every day. And I could go home and just say, "Oh, look at all the stuff I can buy." But man, that's like 8 hours of my life or
Mhm.
more that I was really, really miserable. And that can be sometimes when you're working with clients too. It's like this client pays amazing, but what's it worth? And to a certain extent, it might be like, you know what? I know this is going to be just a slog and they pay well and that's great. But there are some that just really kind of push past that. And you're like, all right, now I just feel dirty and it's not worth it. And I'm going to try and find other companies to work with that pay good or great or is equal and not give my soul to this particular company because some can be a real drain.
And I think you said it earlier, as a interviewer, you have to ask yourself, well, what am I actually looking for in a candidate?
Yes.
And as an individual, I think you have to ask yourself, all right, well, what am I actually looking for in terms of my life? Like what
Absolutely.
does success look like for me?
Absolutely.
And your success and my success look different, right?
Mhm.
So you have to just be okay saying like, well, hey, being successful for me is X and fill in from there. Okay, I
Right.
want to travel. All right. Well,
Yes.
then don't get a physical location job. Like,
Right.
you're not a bad person if you work a remote job, or you're not a bad person if you're job seeking for 2 or 3 months. Or probably what your advice would be, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, get a job, look for the next job, right?
Kind of, yeah. Well, if it's not satisfying. I mean, there's been many instances where I've taken a job because I needed a job. And there's zero shame in that. And, some of them were even great jobs. And I'm like, well, if I can make this here, there's got to be another place out there where I can make this and be happy. It is a matter of having a bit of a strategy just to work towards, for lack of a better term, having it all. I want to have great clients. I want to work for a great place and I want to make great money. I really want to have it all. And, it sometimes takes a while to get there, but if you know that's what your ultimate goal is, it's totally obtainable. It's just really just kind of keeping your eye on the prize and really figuring out the path to get there. And, we don't work with the same clients that we did when we started. When we started, we were like, okay, you want somebody, whatever you want to pay, sounds great, And now we have higher standards because we've kind of gone through some of that where we felt a little abused or taken advantage of, and we worked our reputation to the point where we feel that most of the clients we work with, if not almost all of them now, are real partners with us. We are here to help you.
Hmm.
And it's not about us selling you something. We're relieving a pain here of some kind where you are struggling to find a person and we can find you that great person and that's off your desk. That's, oh my God, find me another one. Find me another one. Find me another one. I love working with you guys. Find me another one. That's where you want to get. And not and I don't know if you run into this often, but okay, well that's great. Can you do it for less? Can you do it for less? What's the margin on this? It's like, well, we're in the price range of what you want. Why do you even care? I just want to know, well, how much are you making off of this? I'm like, can I not make anything off of this? I mean, I have a
Yeah.
company. So yeah, then it's like, you're kind of not a very fun client. I believe I'm providing you a decent value and you're questioning that value, then, I don't know.
Yeah, and it's the
It's
paradox that the clients who pay the most generally ask the least questions,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
The ones who are paying you
And they
these
appreciate
tiny
you.
little
Yep.
little sums of money, they're always very nitpicky. You're
Absolutely.
like, what is this thing? Yeah, and my advice to people out there who are looking to partner, maybe you're a business owner, you're looking to partner with, you need an accounting firm, a legal firm,
Mhm.
a recruiting firm. And this is all our business. So the way that our business works is we partner with brands to work their Amazon business.
Mhm.
So we're full service. We'll physically warehouse the inventory, pick, pack, prep it, ship it into Amazon, design listings, text, content, SEO, full board for them. We are a partner,
Mhm.
and we seek partners in our industry also additionally that view us as a partner. And the best thing I ever heard about this is we're in Columbus, Ohio. There's a big Honda plant here.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked to a Honda executive, and he said, we went over to Japan and we were talking to the individuals over there for Honda, and they were talking about their partners. And they said, we follow more of the Japanese model of partnership, where if you're struggling, we don't get rid of you. We want to help you. We want to help you figure out that challenge.
I love that.
Because they're like, we want to work together for the next 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's this quote that I love, that all the returns in life are compounding,
Mm-hmm.
right? So all the good stuff doesn't happen in the beginning. That's like with a
Right.
relationship, with
That's 100%
compounding interest, with partnerships, right? It all happens at the end. The beginning stuff is all kind of just fluff, you know? So when we build partnerships, we're trying to make sure that a client actually wants to do this for a long period of time, because those clients are going to come and go, like you said, based on price.
Absolutely.
Like someone's going to do it for 2 percentage points less. Like, great. Like if that's what you're looking for the low price leader. Like, we're not your company.
Right.
You know?
And there are people that are very successful that do that. And good luck to you, I say.
Absolutely.
But nobody's, calling me on the weekend, threatening me about, I'm not going to pay you if you don't find me somebody. It's like, oh, you know what? That's not how we work. And to your point, those are the people we like to work with too. Like we outsource, our accounting, our marketing, and things like that. And we want it to be a good relationship. I'm hiring you to take away my pain. I don't want to have questions about my taxes, because I've just handed everything off to you, and I want it to be perfect. Do mistakes come up? Yes. And we sort through it. Then nobody's immediately fired. But the main point of it is I don't want to have to worry about it. So I'm hoping that when people hire us too, it's like, I want you to find me somebody, and I don't want to ever have to worry about it. I want you to take care of, all of the paperwork. I want you to take care of their PTO and their medical and all that sort of stuff. Just make it as carefree as possible so I can do what I'm good at. And because I'm not good at this HR part of it. So that's the sort of relationship we like to have with our vendors. And I'm hoping that our clients feel that the same way with us too.
Yeah. And we deal with so many brands that they just want to get rich so fast. I'm just like, slow down.
Yeah.
You guys can get rich slow. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the slow way a lot of times is the fast way.
Yeah.
We'll talk to vendors and they're like, yeah, we've been through 6 marketing agencies, this year. I'm like, this year?
Oh my goodness.
It's like, I've been through, 6 divorces. I'm like, do you think maybe you might be the problem?
Yeah, exactly. So there's
know?
a common denominator here, and I think it's you.
And
Yeah.
and I think that so many people, they see something's not working, they're like, change it. And I think we live in this hyper fast society now. You scroll through an Instagram and it's, hey, it's not engaged in the first 3 seconds, you move on, right? TikTok,
Exactly.
move on.
Exactly.
And I think in business, that's exciting that the next agency around the corner is going to like solve everything for you.
Mm-hmm.
But that's usually not the way that I see it actually working.
Yeah. And that patience part, which I touched upon before, that was, like I said, I'm not a very patient person, but I have learned that a little bit over time, where you do have to there's a time to plant the seed. You have to kind of let it germinate, and then you can harvest. You can't pick it too soon. You have to really let things take root and grow, and then the payoff is fantastic. But it is a big part of that, being patient and learning as you go. The other side too is there are a lot of problems associated with growing too fast too, because for us, we had talked about the growth of our businesses, and there was definitely a period where we were just hiring, and this is for people internally, and we didn't have all the processes in place because we were just growing so fast. Just figure it out, and a couple of bad hires because people just weren't getting not enough time to train people because we were just growing so fast. So there's a lot to be said about being a little more strategic with your growth plan and being patient and, adding people as needed, taking the steps that are necessary. And it ends up being just so much more rewarding by just breathing a little through the process, I guess.
And I think less stressful.
Oh, absolutely.
If you're like, we have to hit $1 million in the next 11, 12 months, you're just like, well, how? You know? Like,
exactly. Well, so what happens if that doesn't happen? That's always my question.
and those clients are always stressful to work with too, because they're just like,
Right.
we need everything. When we had a client who, they were starting a small brand, I maybe they had $30,000 behind them. And they said, we want to do $1 million this year on Amazon, which if you're starting from zero, that's incredibly hard to do. Not to say it's impossible, but it's incredibly hard to do. And they said, we want to be like a Liquid Death. Liquid Death did $1 million in their first year. And I'm like, okay, well, that was the creative director from Netflix. So He probably knew a little bit about what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
Also, they had millions of dollars in venture
Right,
backing. Like,
right.
this is a weird example that you're using because you're not like them at all. And I'm like, this guy's going to be difficult to work with. I just know he is. So yeah, I think, as a business owner, slowing down a little bit and just saying, hey, like, let's just do like steady, profitable growth, like
Yeah,
for the next 12 months and see where that lands us.
absolutely. And the great parallel to that is that usually when people would want things designed too, they would always say, Apple? Yeah, if you could make it look like Apple, that would be great. I'm
Maybe
like,
we should grow like Apple too. Yeah.
you
that'd
know
be
what?
great.
Apple's Apple.
Yeah.
Let's tell your story, and it's going to be different, But yeah, those wild comparisons are always so off the mark. And I would think in your position too, you would be like, okay, this is what you want, and I hear you, but let us handle it. And it probably will not be $1 million, but it's going to be great. Just let us take care of it. Because that's what they hire you for, right?
Mhm.
To take care of it.
What I always tell clients is, their happiness is always just the gap between expectations and reality.
Yes.
If you're expecting to do $1 million and I'm expecting you to do $5,000 a month,
Right.
and we do $10,000 a month, I'm like, we're kicking ass.
Right.
And you're like, you guys are doing terrible. You didn't even hardly get to 1/10
Right.
of my revenue.
Right.
So it's always just that gap between expectations and reality. And some clients don't want to hear your realistic expectations. They want you to be I think you can, quickly build up to 50 grand a month, maybe 100 grand. And I'm like, look, I've done enough business on Amazon to say like, you're probably not going to do that.
Exactly.
I could lie to you to get your business, but I'm not going to do that because that's going to create problems for me.
And I'm
in
going
the
to guess
future.
somebody has already lied to them and they were not happy. And then that's why they're on their 6th marketing company or something,
Right. So I'm going to transition a little bit. You have your own podcast
Do.
talking about slow growth endeavors, right? So tell me, what was the impetus to start your podcast, and maybe a little bit about, what you try to cover in that.
Well, that was a little bit of introspection, I will say, because I have mentored people, and in many cases, I would tell them what I thought was the right thing to do. And in those same many cases, it was really kind of challenging for them to do it. And I had to ask myself, well, how the hell did I get here? Because again, Bachelor of Fine Arts degree, put myself through school, and here I am as an award-winning CEO. So how do you connect those dots? So I started digging into that a little bit. And what I was discovering is that I always stayed in touch with the creative side of my head, in that I had obviously 15 years in marketing, and then I created a business where I did all the marketing and I did all the selling, and then I started having other people do that. But I always had a vision of what that end result was going to be. And I was essentially creating and innovating all the time, but I was not really aware of it on a surface level. So I started digging into that a little more and started talking to some people just like at, networking events, cocktail parties, whatever. And they did the same thing. And I'm like, you know what, there's something to this. And the people that I mentored were not doing that. They were not innovating. They were working. They were creating jobs for themselves, and they were working. And I'm like, have you thought about storytelling, about why somebody should work for you? And I have not mentored a plumber, but I love using the plumber example for some reason. And that it's like, you are a plumber and there are probably 1,000 plumbers. Why is somebody calling you? What makes you special? What's your story? And a lot of people say, I work hard.
I do good work.
I do good work.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing if you're an accountant or if you're trying to start your own company in any regard. And it's like, this is what I did. This is my experience, and I'm doing this. And I think if I work harder, if I work more, if I get more clients, if I cut my rate more, people will want to work with me. And that's how I'm going to be successful. I'm too afraid to hire anybody. It's got to be me because I don't trust anybody. A lot of the same things were coming up.
Yeah.
And for me, I was more than happy to let go of some of the stuff that I thought that I was not. I like doing it because I think, when you kind of start up, you're like, oh, this is kind of fun. I'm balancing the checkbooks and I'm hiring the people and I'm doing, but then after a while, you're like, you're better at this. I'm going to hire you to do this. So you have to see what the whole picture of what you want your company to be. And if you don't have that vision, if you can't create that, you're never going to get anywhere. And I always was able to do that. And the other people that I was talking to did the exact same thing. They had kind of this magic whole brain thinking trajectory that they were on, and they were able to achieve it. So I'm like, you know what? I got to start capturing this. And then that's where the secret art of business was born, because the secret art of business is that you are using your whole brain. It is the art of doing business. It's the creative part of doing business. And it's essentially, people not just working. They're not just grinding it out and expecting more. They are thinking, well, what if? What if we offer this service? What if this was how we approach things? And us from the very, very beginning, it was
Nice website.
Oh, thank you. It's really kind of thrown together, but it is what it is for now. And yeah, it was just really about just not always this 80 hours, because and granted, when you ever start a business, it is almost like 80 hours a week that you're working, and that's okay, because it's kind of fun then. But it comes to a certain point where you have to think, oh, what's this going to be? And some of the things that I would tell people when I would mentor them is like, what jobs are in your company? What do you do? And let's just go back to an accountant, because that's the complete opposite of me. And it's like, oh, well, I do accounting, and then I get clients. I'm like, so you do sales and you do accounting, and then what else? Do you do the hiring too? Yep, do the hiring. So like you do the HR stuff as well. And the marketing, do you do that? I was like, well, I don't really do marketing because I don't know how to market. Okay, but that could be a role, right? So already I've got you up to 4 positions for this company. When are you going to start hiring for those? You're not. I'm just going to keep working hard to try and do all of it. It's like, yeah, you got to think about what is this going to possibly be, and innovate this and create this and develop it into an actual company and not just a glorified job. Some people are super happy having a glorified job because they think they're in control, and I'm telling you they're not. And it's not until you start adding people, and then you can start paying these people, because now you're getting bigger and you're doing what you're best at. And for me, it was not, and eventually it was not the recruiting. I was always good at the sales part. And then I found a person who's better at sales. And I'm like, okay, well, guess what? You're doing sales now. And I'm going to be, be over here and do the CEO stuff. And, so yeah, but you have to have that vision. You have to have that plan. You have to have that innovative thought process in order to create that. And a lot of the stories that I've talked to, and I really encourage people to listen in and see if they can find themselves in it, because it's 3 questions, and I give people the space to talk about their company and promote their own business. And then we talk about what you did as a kid, because that's where I start liking to connect the dots between how you got to where you are. And in many cases, it's the craziest things. Like I talked to a banker, and the one thing that she said was, in the neighborhood, my brother was a good kid, and I was the one that would always be screwing around, and I would just be talking to people all the time. And I would ask people about their kids, and I'd ask people about, her best asset for where she is right now is that she builds relationships with other people. So as a kid, she was doing this, and now she's doing that as an adult, and she never stopped doing that one thing as a kid that made her so excited. There was another person who I talked with. He was a financial planner from Alaska, and I asked him what he did. And when he was young, he would play in the forest, fight dragons, have these great imaginary things. And the third question, because this is where it's going to come together, is what are you doing now for fun? His what do you think you're doing for now for fun was, well, I'll be perfectly honest, I play Dungeons and Dragons twice a week. And I'm like, oh my God, I love that. And so he's still doing what he did as a kid, doing it now. And I said, well, how do you think that helps you with your business? He goes, because you know what? I can see the story for people. When they come, I know, right? So when they come in and they're like, this is what I want, I can plot that path for them, and it's super clear for me. And I can tell them the story of, if you do this, here's what's going to happen. And I'm like, that is just freaking brilliant. And that happens over and over and over again. And it's based on not work things. It's based on what they had a passion for as a kid, and it marries into what they're doing now that is making them the rock star in that space. And that's how they make businesses, and that's how they are these amazing people, is because they never let go of that. And that's my story too. It's the exact same thing. And I have a mentor as well, and one of the things that he challenged me to, he goes, but how long has it been since you've done like some really, really arty things? And I'm like, you know what? I don't think I've painted a picture since college. And he said, why don't you go to the art store and buy some paint and a canvas and start painting? And I did. And I have probably like about, I don't know, maybe like 50 paintings now in about 3 years, because I just started painting, and it was it just kind of kept flowing out of me. And I haven't, and I started selling them, which was crazy too, because and it was so funny because my mentor said, you just can't paint, can you? You have to monetize it. And I'm like, well, of course I do.
I'm already doing it.
I'm like, what am I going to do with these things? I can't keep them all.
You don't want to be like Picasso and die with 90% of them sitting in the
Right.
studio.
And then I die, then they're expensive, you know?
Exactly.
So essentially, yeah, so I just started painting things, and this is kind of what started coming out of me. And then it started getting more and more sophisticated, which has been kind of fun too. But, you know, people are kind of buying this stuff too. And and I've had a show, and I've, you know, and what's great about that, and I think people kind of relate to this too, is your best ideas come when you're not working. These are the people that have their best ideas in the middle of the night, and they have to have a pad of paper next to it because they're not working. Oh my God, brilliant idea! I've solved that problem. Or they're in the shower and they're like, and they've even invented notepads that you can put in the shower, so you can remember these things when you get out of the shower. And the ideas come when you're not working. And when people take walks, when people are playing with their kids, or maybe they're doing their Dungeons and Dragons, like, holy crap, I got the next great idea of what I'm going to do. So it's about that whole brain process of being successful in business. And this is that one that I show the story behind that. Is a lot of my stuff is the backstory of this is I started painting some things because I have a really deep-seated fear of deep water.
Okay. I
So-
love diving. I love being in the water.
And I am like paralyzed, like around deep water. So this is what I always think about when I'm flying overseas. And this is called calm blue ocean. So when I'm on the plane and I know I'm over the ocean, I have to have a few moments of, okay, calm blue ocean, calm blue ocean. And there's
Yep.
a little tiny plane in the giant ocean. And we got
Yep.
the clear skies heading into the dark clouds. So yeah, and a lot of it is about, they're named after things about like, you know, falling into the water or being over your head, or this is water at night, you know, and just how that that feels when you're like, oh my God, it's so mysterious
Yeah.
and it's so dark, and what could possibly be in there? So those are the things that I'm kind of getting out. It's a little bit, I guess, of therapy as well. But what was interesting is it started ending up creating these amazing patterns that people really started loving. And they're like, could you do one in this color? Because I love what you do and I want it to match my couch. Okay, sure.
Yeah.
How much you going to pay? All right, excellent.
Hey.
But yeah, a lot of it is just stuff that is, you know, things that are pressing on my mind, or like I said, these fears that I have. And, but again, it gets me out of the work, and I'm able to innovate again. And that's where I think some of the ideas about the podcast is coming about, and other things that I'm trying to innovate and develop with too, because I was able to get out of that everyday sort of stuff. And honestly, for the people that have a hard time with that, because I did too, it is literally on my calendar. All the stuff that I do, because I live and die by the calendar. And I even tell my family, if it's not on the calendar, it's not going to happen. Mom will not be there, or I'm not going to be at that dinner, husband, because it was not on the calendar, because everything just fills up so quickly. But I do reserve time to do this creative stuff. And it could be as simple as, you know, walks are the gateway drug to doing this. So definitely start taking those walks, take your dog, take your kid, whatever. And just start getting into that process by small steps. This was a big leap for me, but what was interesting is it was there all the time. You know, Dorothy in the shoes, I had the power to do it all the time. I just kind of ignored it and was so distracted by other things. So I always encourage people, what did you do as a kid that would kind of excite you? And I think yours was soccer.
Well, I did. I mean, I was, you know, a sports kid.
Yeah,
Because
and-
you asked me, like, well, what was your creative thing? And it was funny. I was thinking
But see,
about
that
it.
counts. It does count.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that was probably more
The
what I-
strategy behind that, and the competitiveness, and how am I going to win, and you know, where do I have to be, where's the ball going to go? I mean, that has nothing to do with business, nothing. But it's just this free thinking, in the moment sort of stuff that, and I have somebody who was very much into baseball. It's the same sort of thing. And I asked, what did you like about baseball? He goes, I loved problem solving, and I loved the coaching, and I love hanging out with friends, and I loved the conversations. He's doing that right now. That's business. That is business. But if he didn't do that and get used to it and grow up with that, he would not be as successful as he is now if it wasn't that natural for him. And I think I was able to draw, at least in my mind, I was able to draw some comparisons, the same thing kind of with you too. It's like, these are the things that really got your heart racing, probably literally and not so literally. I can't even think what the opposite
Figuratively.
is. Figuratively,
Yeah.
thank you. And you're still very competitive. I could tell it about you already, when I first met you. And, it's that strategy, and it's that you got to have fun, doing it. But ultimately it's going to be about that win. And that's okay. That's okay, because if I didn't win, well, what did I do wrong? Now I'm going to go back and think about it. And it's all, but you kept it alive. And that's what makes the difference for people. It's when you start abandoning that, or you didn't really get the opportunity to really invest in that. Because one of the things I'm working on too is writing a book with this idea. And I remember when I was in the 5th grade, I was awarded the title of artist.
Ooh.
Me and one other person. You two are artists.
That's the labeling bias coming in right there.
What does that mean
right?
for everybody else is what I thought about later, because they were probably creative too. What about the writer that was in the room? What about that kid that always had the one-liners? He was creative too, but because I could literally draw something, that made me and this other person an artist.
Right. That's like the most rudimentary description of
exactly.
artist. This person can draw a little bit.
It was honestly a game changer for me, though, because for me, that was not even an option for me growing up. I mean, my life was going to be destined to work in the factory like my family did. But because somebody kind of planted the seed in my head that I was an artist, I started exploring that. And that's, why words matter, why mentorship matters and things like that, because people don't see it unless they kind of can see it in you or see how you got there. That's why I think it's, really important to do that. The problem of that, though, too, is I see such potential in some people and they don't see it in themselves, and that becomes painful. But going back to the artist thing, is like there are people who could have done, I think, so much more if that had been encouraged. But our society, our world is very much along the lines of, if you're not working 40 hours a week, you're not being useful. I think that's a great goal to have, but if that's all you do, and then there's the people that push that too, and they're like, well, you only work 40, I work 80 hours a week. And I'm like, but all the time? Is that going to be your life? And like I said, there's times for that for sure, but it's not just that. And when you can get more complex as a person, that's where the magic happens. And that's where you kind of get to work less too. You get to be inventive, be creative, and just say, oh, you know what? I'm not going to do that anymore, because what if I hired somebody to do that? That's better than me. And now we're double the size, and now I'm going to hire 2 more people, and now we're, quadruple the size. Because you're always thinking about and always innovating with your own business, with your own career, with all of that stuff. So it's important to kind of feed that beast. Even if somebody told you in the 5th grade that you were not an artist.
Yeah, and when I was a kid, I don't remember being super artistic, but the thing that I do remember vividly, and that I said to you, was if someone was doing a project and we had find a speaker or find a historical figure throughout history and give a speech on them, I would make sure that I didn't pick the same thing as anybody else. I wanted somebody totally different.
I remember you telling me that.
I didn't want to do the same thing as everyone else.
That's boring.
Exactly. It's boring. Okay, you're doing Abraham Lincoln. Well, can't do Abraham Lincoln.
Doing that.
You're doing MLK. Can't do MLK. I had to find my own unique thing. And
I was going to say, did you find somebody that was just practically nobody ever heard of?
Probably. Yeah.
Because that's the best.
And that's kind of manifested in my career, because everyone sort of went to the right, and I was like, all right, well, I'm going to do something on the left. I'm going to do something different. I don't want to do the same thing as everybody else. That's kind of the way that I found creativity. And you talk about business being a creative activity, and I think so many people don't quite realize that a business owner is a creative person.
Absolutely.
Because they're creative problem solving. They're literally solving something that people previous to them have not solved.
Yes.
You don't really think of an inventor as a creative type. You're like, oh, that's like an engineer, I guess.
But they are.
Exactly. And you talk about, keep a notepad for all your good ideas.
Mm-hmm.
I would suggest just keep a note on your phone, and I will write down the ideas that I have as soon as they come.
Same.
I wrote down 2 today, business ideas, and I don't know if I'll ever bring these to fruition, but I've written so many down now, and half of them I don't even remember. I look back and I'm like, what was that?
I gotta get better at describing these.
I'll give you one. I had 2 today. So I was driving to work and listening to a podcast, and they were talking about these AI chat applications that men are talking to that like replicate a girlfriend.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah.
that's like crazy. But of course.
So I was like, well, that makes sense, you know? But I was like, well, me personally, I don't think I would be into that. I think, you know, I want to find real human connection.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But I was like, you know what a good app would be is a chat application that teaches people how to text like the opposite sex and be like fun and
that's a good
flirtatious
idea.
and be like, I'm just practicing basically until like, I actually get this cute girl's number. I want to do something with it. And it's like, well, I've practiced with the AI and they've told me like, nah, that's not the right path. That's not
That
working.
would be awesome because then you could have like an AI woman say, "Oh, dude, that was creepy."
And they just never text back. Like, dang it. You just get ghosted by the
You don't
AI.
get any points for that. You got to get to the next level.
And I didn't take any more time than that. I wrote down like chat application.
That's really
for,
quite brilliant.
you know, girlfriend practice. And I just moved on. And who knows, it could exist.
Oh, somebody will definitely come up with that because it is kind of a good idea.
I probably won't be the person who comes up with it. That's not my business. Like I don't have the time or resources or knowledge or know-how. It's a good idea, but a lot of people have good ideas, you know?
Well, especially, and even that could be even a kind of a bigger, if we're just going to sit here and ideate. That would even be a bigger idea too, because, they're saying right now in society, people have a hard time with conversations. Kids today, they don't know how to hold a conversation. Well, what if there was a app that helped them practice with that?
And I actually don't think they're that far away from the vocal conversations either.
Yeah.
So you could practice an interview. Like, oh, I'm really nervous to do this interview. Or we have a new gal in here. She's a little nervous to give the pitch. So she's practicing by herself. But when we get a brand that I'm like, we're probably not going to take this partner on, I just let her go do it. But she's still like nervous. She still thinks it's the Super Bowl. But she could maybe practice on an application and say, hey, this is a fake client with this fake backstory.
Critiques for it. I mean, that would be kind of cool.
Yeah, well, that's not a bad idea.
If anyone's listening.
That's
our idea.
Let's take a quick break and then we'll circle back here in a second.
Right, awesome.
Catherine, so you are part of the National Association of Women Business Owners, the Columbus chapter. So I got some questions about that. I was just making mention that we have a 22-year-old gal who just got started with us. And there's probably a lot of business owners that are in my shoes where you're growing your team and now you're starting to, have a diverse workforce. You got gals, you got guys, you got people of all, makeups. And I was kind of asking you to give me some advice on like how to coach this gal, right? Because there's certain things that we want to like help her understand and mold her because she has a certain appearance at the business. There's I think tendency for young gals in a company to get labeled as maybe like naive, and then it's like, geez, like I got to coach her up through this. So maybe just like give me any advice that you have on how, as a business owner, to work with my like female colleagues. I'm not trying to make it like a weird thing, but I'm just trying to be helpful to them.
Yeah. And I think one of the wickets that people can fall into quickly is, and my husband has the same thing too. How do I approach somebody and make it sound like I'm not mansplaining something, because that's just the buzzword right now. And I think in some cases that may have been pushed too far. And I don't like that when people women especially, throw that red flag out right away. Is this person genuinely trying to be helpful, or are they truly mansplaining something? And I think most of it, I'm even going to say, comes from a kind of a good place. And I would have to say you could kind of diffuse that from a man's standpoint by just saying, almost even calling it what it is and just saying, if I'm mansplaining this to you, you got to let me know, but I'm trying to help you. And it diffuses all of that, I think. And if honestly, I will tell the women out there, if that's not good enough for you, then you're going to have to take a little step back, because some of my best mentors have been men. I've had women too. And that, all that information that stands on its own. And we talked about, NABO, and I will go back to that in a second, but, everybody has all this valuable information, and you have to understand that, especially if you're young and you're new and you're learning, just be a freaking sponge. And if you know it, just say, I got it, or whatever. There's no harm in that either. I think we have to really kind of approach this as we are all just people, and we are trying to do our best. It all comes from a good place until it doesn't. So don't go to that place until you really have, because don't automatically think like everything's coming at you that's bad. I like I said, I think people are mostly wired to be good people, and unless there is something that does turn into a red flag, then don't freaking worry about it. Don't start inventing things. Now, with the National Association of Women Business Owners, I joined that 18 years ago. It was like one of the first things I did when I started a company, because for me, I needed to be around women that ran companies. And it is a little different than when guys run companies, because just from the mindset and knowing, what the hurdles are. So for that, it was super, super valuable. So if you are a woman in the workplace and you feel like, I'm working with a whole bunch of guys, I want to talk to somebody who's kind of walked this path already. Super valuable, super valuable. And that's really almost like for anything. If you're kind of in uncharted waters in any regard, I would tell people, get around people that have done it before and they will help you. With that said, that's the same thing if you are the boss of a young woman. You've been down this path before and you're just trying to be a guide. And as long as that is really super clear, there should not be any pushbacks. Some of the benefits that I have had with male mentors is that in some cases they will, for lack of a better term, call my BS on some stuff because I get stuck in my own head about some things that, and they won't let me have it because they will throw back in my face, you know what, a guy wouldn't think about that for a second. And so for me, gauntlet thrown, you're right. A guy would not think about that. They would not be intimidated by that. So I'm going to go in and just, do this as a person versus it being a gender specific thing. And when I did start working, and going to networking events. And I honestly, just recently this happened again too. I was one of the few women in the room too. People would talk to you, oh, who do you work for? And I'm like, well, I work for me, and you have to be just kind of okay with that was, especially for me, that was not the norm at the time. And it might not be what people assume right away, but don't get hung up by it. Just, you let it, no, it's me. I started the business and here's what I do. And not be intimidated in that sort of room too, because there are a lot of people there with perhaps a lot of experience. There's a lot of people that are just faking it just like you are. We're all just people. We're just kind of figuring it out. So I would definitely recommend, for women specifically, not to get too crazed. I think there's a fair amount of truth in a lot of the stuff that goes on. But in some ways, pick your battles. Are you being challenged? Don't be afraid. Step into that light and say, I'm going to do better, because this is the perspective of business and not necessarily men versus women. Men tend to be a little more competitive. Women tend to be more nurturing, and that's just, how we're wired. And I think each side has a really great benefit to it, because if you are trying to get a client, are they going to always want the competitive side? Nope, they're going to kind of want somebody who wants to be nurturing too. It's like, here's how we're going to take care of you. Oh, and by the way, we're going to try to get as big a markup as we can. So a good business somehow lands somewhere in all of that. Or we're going to be number one. And, certain mindsets go for that. Certain minds go for that. So in some cases, maybe it just comes down to what your strength is too. But I have always tried to be as absorbent of all the information, because I am in a space that I did not know a whole lot about. The tables have kind of turned a little bit on that, where my experience now, conquers a little bit of, how naive I am in some regards, but I love learning too. And if people want to be successful too, always be willing to learn and not think you know everything. And that kind of brings kind of the guard down a little bit too. It's like, okay, well, you might be over-explaining this to me, but it kind of comes from a good place. And actually now he's still talking about it. So I'm just gonna say, you know what, I got it, and like I said, it's doesn't have to be that big of a deal.
Yeah. I've heard that a lot of, and I've seen this in our business between, like male managers and females, that sometimes men will just try to immediately solve the problem. There's a problem.
Yes.
Just solve it,
Yes.
and that's kind of maybe where some of this mansplaining comes from. Well, what you need to do is you need to go to this, you need to send this email, it needs to be about this long. And then women just want to like verbalize like the problem and maybe like just talk through the problem, not just get a solution.
And both sides have a lot of value. So I think if people kind of can meet in the middle on that too, that's really great. And I will say I have met a lot of people, men and women, that have a hard time delegating because it's just easier for me to do it. It's just easier for me to tell you how to do it. And that both sexes are guilty of. Everybody's guilty of that to a certain point. But And then like that whole explaining stuff, sometimes it's like, let's just think about this for a second. I know what you want me to do, but what if somebody might have a great solution, but there are times too where, we don't have time for that. I know, just call them up and tell them this, and this is what we're going to do. So, I mean, that's just business. And I don't think people need to necessarily take that personally. Some of this stuff I think bleeds out of bad relationships sometimes, and maybe sometimes people bring these habits home, and now it's starting to populate business. Like I said, it's there, but I always like to start with it coming from a good place first, because I have had situations where, like for example, I'll be at a networking event and somebody might say, I'm standing next to like an important businessman, for example, and they say, "Oh, is this your assistant?" Ooh, I can see where you could assume that, but no. So I don't know. And then the person typically feels kind of bad for making that assumption. So, but I'm not going to just stand toe to toe with this guy and be like, "How dare you?" It's just like,
yeah, you don't seem like the type of person to get.
I might want to work with this guy sometimes. I don't want to burn this bridge. But and maybe it's just me, but I do give people a lot of leeway in that regard. There are some points where I don't like, I don't like when people take my ideas, because that's probably my big thing. I will say something, and then like a minute later, some guy has that exact same idea, and the one that was heard. There are ways to get kind of around that too, to get your credit back. But I don't know. I just feel like just kind of be aware of it and don't be triggered too much. I think most of it really kind of comes from a good place. But there are some things that women can do to kind of level up the playing field. And this is one of the very few times that I do use sports terminology. And that is, if you want to be in business, if you want to be successful, you got to know the rules of the game. And that's for men and for women. And I think sometimes women kind of come in not knowing those rules, and they show up to a baseball game with a hockey mask. And you're like, well, we're glad you're here, and we're glad you want to play, but you don't have any of the equipment to actually be effective. And one of the things that I spent a lot of time on, especially early in my career, was being present, being heard, make sure I'm heard, because this is what guys do. I mean, guys will talk over each other. Don't be necessarily offended by that. That's just how the game is played. Guys will shake hands. And I met this guy, I thought it was so interesting. He shook every guy's hand, and then he did not shake mine. And I'm like, okay, that was kind of weird. Now I could be really offended, or I can shake his hand. I could put my hand out. And so I did. And he was like, I never shake a woman's hand unless she extends it first. And I'm like, wow, that is some old school etiquette. But you know what? Stick your hand out, and this is the game. We, in business, we shake hands, and we, this is how we do it. And
are you a firm handshaker?
I'm a
You
firm handshake.
try to go
Get it
in
right
and
in that,
really,
right in that nook.
Yep, right in the crease.
Right in the crease, and you got to make it a firm handshake. You don't make it a girly handshake, because that's the way the game is played. And what's so funny about that is nobody ever thinks twice about any of it. It's like, oh, well, she's a business person. And it's not like people start talking down to me or mansplaining anything to me. It's like, she knows the rules of the game. So, you know what, let's play. And that's at least been very effective for me too. And we had mentioned, and kind of in passing, that I do board work too. I'm no longer on the Greater Columbus Arts Council, but that was an amazing experience. But I have been on the chamber board for about 9 years now, and I just did join the CCAD board. And the one thing about the chamber board, I mean, you are there with a bunch of heavy hitter business people that are scrappy and they're forceful, and don't just sit there and be the wallflower. I've been invited to government roundtables, and I have been shocked when I see women file in and they sit along the wall versus at the table. I'm the nerd that sits at the table, and I'm like, you know what? They're going to know that I'm here because I'm taking my time out of my schedule. So I'm going to sit here and I'm going to ask questions, and there might be, basic questions, but they're going to know that I have a presence here. So there are things that women can do. Again, like I said, that just learn the rules of the game. And when you are invited to a discussion, you participate. When you are in a group activity, don't just sit on the bench. We're all here to play, and you get that respect a lot quicker when you are there prepared and you have all the tools and you're conversing and you're sharing and you're giving your opinion.
Yeah, and tell me if I'm thinking about this wrong.
Guys too. I don't want guy wallflowers either.
No. But what I was going to say is exactly along that line, that if you're a female in a male-dominated business setting, you kind of have two directions that you can go. You can be super confident, like you are. I get that impression. Or you can be like that wallflower.
Absolutely.
Which a guy can do that too.
Absolutely.
But a guy does not stand out if he's that wallflower. He's just like one of the employees, right?
Right.
But if Catherine's here and Catherine doesn't really say much, and then when we ask her a question, she's really like we can tell she's nervous to answer that question. It's like, ooh, maybe she doesn't belong here, you know, right? But I think on the opposite side of that is if you have a woman that is very confident in herself and in that setting, you're like, oh, that's like kind of a superpower.
Yeah.
Because if it's just a confident guy, it's like, yeah, that's like one of our good performers.
Yeah, exactly.
But he has all the characteristics just like everybody else. Whereas you have this unique thing plus confidence. It's like, oh, that's impressive, you know, when you see that.
The thing about that too, because you were talking about, is this person a fit? I think that's a good question that people do need to ask too, because if your environment is, I'll just use an example, like a lot of yelling and, it's like, we're going to, pound chests and we're going to, look at the numbers, and it's just like, or the opposite where, might be like, this is a very quiet office place and we bring cookies in on Friday. And if that's not your bag, you're not in the right job. It goes back to the whole culture thing. That job is for somebody else and that person's out there and you should go find that person. And maybe you're not the person for that either. I've worked with some brands that are, you're either going to make it or you're not. One of them was Bath and Body Works. Not everybody can work for Bath and Body Works. You have to understand, ingredients and scents and that whole gingham feel. I was not a gingham person by any stretch, but I got it. I was able to figure it out and understand what it was that made that sell. There's some people that would come in there that just could never figure it out. And that's okay. You know what? We got Victoria's Secret right across the street. So maybe you can go over there and you can have a greater impact. I believe in many cases that, you can relieve yourself of duty in some cases, like, this is just not my place. Zero shame in it. Zero shame. Because you have now denied your amazing ability with some other company. So you go find that company. And, and I feel it's the same way like when we have to let people go too. This is not your job. And you're going to go find your job and you're going to be great at it. But it is not in this environment. Because we have had, salespeople that were just really, aggressive salespeople. And that works great. Great in some environments, but that's not how we do business. So it was not successful. And again, it was like, if we decided that was a culture, we could have said, okay, everybody's going to be like this now, but we weren't. But so that person has moved on and I'm sure are doing something fantastic somewhere else. But, that sort of situation does come up and it could be male or female. You just got to find your job. And sometimes you just hang around long enough to get some great experience to get that next job too. Because I've done that too. It's like, this job really sucks, but I'm going to learn some things and I'm going to move on.
Yeah. I read you said one of your favorite mantras is you're a goddamn cheetah. Can you tell me what that means?
That is a stolen quote. But it's a great story. And, oh gosh, the name of the author is right on my list. So if you can look that up.
Sure, we can find it.
You're a goddamn cheetah. It is a story about this woman who took her kids to the zoo. And we have this at our zoo too, where, they bring the cheetah out and the cheetah will show, that I have to wait until I can see this now. Where's the author?
Glennon Doyle?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, thank you. Because that was going to kill me. She wrote a great book on this. But in the story, they bring the cheetah out and then the cheetah performs like, you're going to run and get the ball and then you're going to get the steak and then you're going to do this and perform. And the kids were like, oh, yay, that was so fun. And then the cheetah went back to the cage and spotted something that was made it more of a predator again. And her child said, they just remember that they were a cheetah. And it's the same sort of thing in this case, it's directed towards women, but it can be really directed towards anybody. And where society puts us in such a box, makes us perform, and we forget that we're really we're really tougher than we think. That we just kind of get back to this primal need to succeed, this primal need to, know where our power is and not to be domesticated, I guess. And that happens to both men and women. It's like I said, in this particular case, it was geared towards women. In her case of being fit into a box that she did not feel like she fit into. And then she remembered, oh no, wait a minute, that's not me. This is not my life. This is not my beautiful wife, my beautiful car. How the hell did I get here? Based on the song, and it's, and we do have that where you start going down this path. And I have seen this with other people too. Like people might graduate with an art degree, then they end up in a sales role because that was the first thing that was available. And you know what? That was super, they pay me really great. And then I met this woman there that was really awesome. And we decided we're going to, buy this house in this neighborhood that she wanted to live in. And we bought this car because this car is what everybody got. And then we're going on this vacation because that's what everybody else does. And then suddenly this person wakes up and they're like, wait a second. I wanted to be an artist and I wanted to live in New York and I wanted to not have a car. And I want, so that's kind of what it is. You're reminded by what your superpower is in a way. And that's a process that I have gone through and I kind of keep that in my mind. It's like, don't, get domesticated, always, be hungry, be that person that hunts and the person that can seek out greater things and don't fit in this box. And I did go through a period of my life where that was kind of the case. I was doing everything I was supposed to do. And I found myself to be really pretty miserable and kind of broke free from that and was able to really do what I wanted to do.
You seem like a person who has a business, who's successful, has a family, and is also pretty happy.
Yeah.
How do you coach people through managing that? Because I know some business owners that they are just like crazy stressed out and they're just like, oh, I'm just trying to make it,
Yeah.
And I'm like, why are you doing this to yourself?
Right.
And maybe it's a place of privilege, right? Because our business is successful. It's not to say it doesn't have bumps. It does. And we're to the point where we can pick clients that are better for us.
Right.
But how would you coach somebody up to manage that? And not to say that you have it all, because I'm sure, things go wrong and you don't feel good on days, but you seem like you have a lot of the things that people strive for.
Well, one of the things that I like to think about is how would I feel working for myself? I think in some cases people have a vision of what the CEO or the president should look like. How should that person behave? How should that person live their life? And if I'm an employee and I see that my boss is completely stressed out all the effing time, can't solve a problem, it's just problem after problem after problem, it's me that's a problem then, So I'm the CEO, I'm driving this company. If there's a problem, heavy is the head that wears the crown. So if it is my company and it is that effed up, I'm doing something wrong. So for me, I always try to have, because for me, I had my company and then shortly after that, like maybe 3 years after that, I had a daughter. And so then you start thinking about, okay, well, life balance. How do I have it all sort of thing? And for me, what worked, and maybe there's some nugget in here somewhere, where I decided, okay, when I am on the clock, I'm on the clock 100%. When I'm off the clock, I'm off the clock. And when I dropped her off, I was on the clock and I was off the clock when I picked her up. And would I keep working once I put her to bed? Yeah, I did. But that time frame for my work was precious. The time frame with my daughter was precious. She has never wanted more of my time because she knows, and I've kind of trained her, I guess, in a way that this is your time. And now that she's a teenager, she could care less about that, or cares less and less about it. But there's many instances like she does sports now, and it's not like she hangs out with me, but the fact that I'm there is huge. So it's really figuring out how to juggle, it's not so much life balance, but to just juggle everything and knowing that some of those balls that you're juggling are glass, some are rubber, some are paper, and really kind of figuring out which one can't I drop. And the daughter was one I can't drop. And if something were to come up, like we would have problems and there were some stressful moments, it's how much of that are you going to allow in yourself? It's all under my control, all of it. what am I going to do? Well, how am I going to figure this out? How am I going to problem solve it? And you can't just make it like it's a job. I've created a job for myself, and now I have all this crap hitting the fan. It's kind of your own making when you think about it. So how do I peel this apart? Do I need to hire somebody? Do I need to go to the bank? Do I need to, talk to my accountant? It's, sometimes it's just a lot of fast-footed moving to figure out the problem. But, it never felt super out of control because I always felt like I had a good balance or a good juggle going on of a lot of things. And like I said, it's what you make of it. And there might be some situations too where you just are not cut out to be a business owner and be okay with that. You could be a freaking rock star as a VP somewhere.
Maybe make more money too.
And and definitely make more money. Yeah. I'll go as far as that. And it takes a bit of an iron stomach to run a business, and you have to love learning, and you have to love problem solving. And it's a little bit of a disease. And there's some people where when they get a problem, they panic. And for me, it's always been, if I got a problem, I'm always like, okay, how are we going to fix this? What can we do? And you immediately start throwing out some things and pulling in the right people. And it's almost fun in a way, I hate to say, but we've had a couple of instances where you're just, you're dropping F-bombs left and right. So it happens, it's not like you're free of it. But I also look at it as, this is business. This is what you kind of sign up for. I saw where I made my mistake. I was too trusting. I was too whatever. And you know what? We're not going to do that again. And you don't, you just learn from it. You learn, you problem solve, and you kind of move on. But you just never try and lose control of it, because if it's out of control, that's not a way to live.
Yeah, today I just heard Elon Musk say, he's like, people think that starting a business is going to be fun. And yes, there are those fun moments. But as the CEO, you're the person who gets all of the problems.
Yes.
So by definition, your job is dealing with the most difficult and hard problems at the company. So you're
absolutely
constantly just dealing with the worst situations and trying to make the best of them. I was like, wow, that's an interesting way of putting it.
And that's absolutely true. And there might be a situation where, I don't know, let's just say, somebody on my team makes a huge mistake. They're not going to, the client doesn't call them. Or if they do, guess who they're going to want to talk to next? Me, And what am I going to do about it? And for me, it's like, okay, let's figure out what happened. Let's see how this is not going to happen again. What's it going to take for this to make you feel better about this? Sometimes they want an apology, and that's nothing. Sometimes they want a full reimbursement. All right, there you go. You just fix it. It's daily. And like I said, unless you love it, it's sometimes, like I said, sometimes it's not fun. Sometimes it's just trickier, but when you solve it, it's so awesome.
Yeah. I think I'm like you. After 5 o'clock, I'm just like, I'm pretty much done.
Yeah.
People are like, oh, this person sent an email. Look at it. I was like, no, I don't want to open that.
No.
Good, bad, or indifferent. I don't want to open it
Here's
right
the
now.
thing. Most of the time, they don't expect a reply.
Yeah.
They're getting it off their desk and putting it on Tears. And I know this because I do this all the time. I'm like, I'm going to get this email out because I'm going to forget. So I'll send it out. And then I hate it when people reply sometimes when it's like 8 o'clock at night. I'm like, no, you weren't supposed to reply. I just wanted to get it off my desk.
Yeah.
So yeah, and honestly, for your clients, if they feel like it's in control, they're okay. I think I've run into I know I've run into a lot of people that feel like they have to respond right away. And that's awesome. It truly, truly is. But it's not always the expectation. And sometimes maybe the immediate response is, I just want you to know that I saw this and I'm going to address this in the morning. Great. It's off my desk and now it's on you and I don't have to worry about it anymore. So yeah, and for me, I don't know how it is with you. I come in really hot in the morning where I'm like, I have all my energy first thing in the morning. And by 4 or 5 o'clock, I start tapping out. The energy starts running down. So I know this about myself. And if I can take that break and cut off at 5 o'clock, there might be some things that I'm still thinking about at 8. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to get back online and I'm going to have to sort through some things just so I can sleep. You're not necessarily off the clock for the most part, but I do have a lot of sacred time because I want to have everything. So.
Yeah. And, what you're good. So what I was going to say is that I just am in it for the long haul. Like,
yeah.
If you are just mentally charged up to 100 at all times of day, all times of week, all times of month, you can't do this.
It's
for
not
a long
sustainable. It really, really isn't.
Of time. So just set it up so that you can actually balance it.
Yeah.
There's gonna be tomorrow. And it's gonna come.
It's also a great test to see, okay, if I am this pressured, do I need to hire some help.
For sure.
Again, somebody who's better at this than me that can delegate. I can delegate some of this little stuff away because maybe I only work on the big problems, and then all that regular stuff can be handed off to somebody else. Because now we're starting to pick up speed because we're starting to lighten your load as the CEO, so they can go faster. So.
Yeah, I mean, this entrepreneur I really like, he says you should be too busy to do coffee while still keeping an uncluttered schedule.
Oh, I like that.
And that's what it is. Like me, I don't want to take on too many projects because then when the project comes on that I actually am needed for,
Right.
I'm like, oh, I'm too busy for that. And they're like, well, nobody else can do this. And then it's like, well, I'm doing all these little mundane minutia tasks that I really probably shouldn't be doing anyway.
Yes.
I feel better suited to be like, I don't have as much to work on as I could, and I'm just kind of ready. I'm kind of like a lion, ready to hunt.
And there is a mindset too that if every second of my day is not packed, then I'm not being effective. This goes back to the secret art of business too. Those moments where there's no work can sometimes be the most valuable, and it's coming up with the next great idea, which people always think is ridiculous, but it's freaking true. And sometimes you can look at it from the perspective of what's not working with my company and how can I fix that too, because you get a chance to kind of take a breath, get your head up and say, hey, you know what, that person over there, they haven't been pulling their weight for let me check, a while now. Does that person need something? Do they need some help, or are they not a right fit? So, but that stuff can just go on for years if you're not paying attention as a CEO.
Yeah. And I think that, as a business owner, again, there's always going to be tomorrow. You can come back, regroup the next day.
Absolutely.
You don't have to panic tonight. You don't have to open that email at 8 p.m. Like, sleep good tonight.
Exactly.
Come back refreshed.
What if it has a big problem in it and you can't sleep?
Exactly. I'm just like, and I'm not going to do anything right now.
Right.
Like,
So
I
I'm just
know
gonna save that.
I know that my day and my night is over. I am not going to drive back to the office and try to work on this. Day's over. I'll come back tomorrow.
Yeah, I got to come back 100%.
I'll work on it.
That's not going to happen if I am working until 10 o'clock.
Catherine, thank you for coming and hanging out with us today. Maybe tell everybody where they can find you, find your podcast, connect with you, or connect with your agency potentially if they need some help.
Oh, absolutely. My website for my company is very simple, portfoliocreative.com.
Good name.
To get in touch with me for the secret art of business or for any of my artwork, it's KatherineLang-Cline.com. And yeah, I'd be more than happy to, talk to people more about this or talk more about art, or if people feel like that they have a secret art that they would like to talk about with their business, I would love to have them on the podcast because it's very fun to have these conversations. So, yeah, that's me. And I really appreciate you having me on. This has been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Are there any types of guests that you're looking for your podcast, or are you stocked out with guests?
I have actually a little bit of a backload of guests, which is great. But the ideal person to be on there is somebody who is a successful business owner or leader. And I will take care of the rest as far as figuring out, dissecting how they got to where they are magically. Unless, of course, their dad wrote them a big check, but which happens too. But even then, maybe there's a story there too. But yeah, it's about people that are successful and would love to talk about a little bit about their childhood and how they got here, and would like to offer some wisdom, because I think every bit of business nugget is beneficial for everybody, because you never know what's going to resonate with somebody. So I love people coming on and sharing their stories. It's a lot of fun.
International, right?
International. Yes, the international podcast. So yes, you will get that exposure as well. So yeah, it's been a crazy ride, but I love the conversation and I love talking to people. So
awesome. Well, I hope you keep it going, and I appreciate everything you've done so far for us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Have a good one.